This video guide is going to demonstrate how to counter the swarm host with all three races in Starcraft 2. We're going to start with Protoss and work our way through the races from there. And we're going to discuss not only how to stop swarm hosts, but also how to stop swarm hosts that have backup from queens and spore crawlers. So the first thing I want to discuss is air units. Really any air unit can work against the swarm host. Phoenix do. I'll show you those real quick. So imagine you have a borrowed swarm host. Phoenix can come pick it up out of the ground. Gotta have detection though. Sure, observer goes over. And you can actually pick those out of the ground. You really need a minimum of 4 Phoenix to get a swarm host off of one graviton beam. So that's the magic number. But if there's a lot of queens or spore crawlers around, obviously you can't do that. Same thing with void rays. They're very good against. I want to speed up observers just because it's just for the video's sake. You can see void rays are very quick at destroying these as well. The only problem is queens will give you issues if there's too many of them. But a couple of void rays can help. So another thing we'll talk about, Tempest is good. We'll go over that later. Another good option is the Warp Prism. I just wanted to show you what I mean by that. You can use the Warp Prism for several things. Basically, Locusts don't have any anti-air attack. So if you have units, and your units are about to get hit by Locusts, you can scoop them up. In particular, Immortals work good. And you can just focus down swarm hosts very quickly. And before the next wave, you can, run out. And also, if the Protoss is sending their Locusts this way, you can swoop in with a Warp Prism from up top, put it in warp mode or phasing mode, warp in a wave of zealots and hit them from behind. That's really helpful if it's just swarm hosts, queens, and spore crawlers. You wait for the Locusts to go. If your base is over here, sneak in with zealots from behind. It works very well. Okay, so I wanted to talk about what happens when the Protoss or the Zerg player has the whole setup with the queens and the spore crawlers. So you might run into an army that looks something like this, and the real answer here is to get Colossus. So let me show you what the build that, if you haven't seen, you're likely to see at some point. So the Zerg player has this base here. Usually it's not a hatchery, I just started it. They'll just spread the creep out here. And then they'll build some spore crawlers around so you can't use Phoenix. And they'll use queens so you can't use void rays. And they'll try to siege your base. And they'll just hold here with these queens. So the answer here is the Colossus. When you have enough, you can just nuke the Locusts before they ever get in range. So you don't want your initial zealots to... You can even kite backwards with these. Okay, once you kill off that wave of Locusts, you can finally push in. Don't let your observers get too close. You don't want them to get taken out. And once you start killing the swarm host, it's not much of a competition anymore. But you can kite them backwards like this. And yeah, once you start clearing out the Locusts, this is the perfect time if you had more ground units. The only thing is to use Colossus in this manner. You can see I have a lot of Colossus. If a Zerg player is going all in with swarm hosts on 2 bases with this build, you need 2 Robotics Facilities. 1 is not going to be enough production. You gotta have 2, because if you only have the 1, you're just not going to have the kind of units you need. So that's that. And the other thing I want to discuss is in the same sort of setup, if we had Tempests, they also work extremely well. And in even smaller numbers. So, let's say we had a ton of swarm hosts. You'll find that the Tempest is very good. You don't really need many of them. You can just work a couple into your army and just kind of siege the enemy. Obviously I didn't add an observer, but the Locusts can't do anything. The Queens really can't do anything against the Tempest. The Tempest just outranges it by so much. And then you can pick off the rest of these, and it's no contest, as you can imagine. Like I said, you only need a couple. So that's about it for the Protoss. I did want to show you one thing real quick. You can use Blink Stalkers to counter the Swarm Host, and I'll show you how that's done real quick. Let's make sure we have Blink enabled. Yep. So imagine you have Swarm Hosts, and they're rallying their Locusts over, and you've got Stalkers. Well, if you're off creep, Stalkers are faster. You know, they can, oh, that didn't work out right. So you can avoid the Locusts. I'm going to wait for the first wave to die here. Okay, so let's say they have a wave of Locusts, and they're coming right for your Stalkers. Just run away and around. And when you have distance, you can blink forward. And then you can scoot and shoot past the Swarm Hosts. And you can just do that a couple times. It's more of an advanced counter. You know, you're not going to go out of your way to build Blink Stalkers, but if you did do Blink Stalker, you don't necessarily have to die to Swarm Hosts. Okay, so that's it for the Protoss counters. Protoss, I spent the most time on them just because they're the most likely to go against Swarm Hosts, and Swarm Hosts tend to be the most effective against them. Okay, so let's jump over to Terran. Say you have a bunch of Swarm Hosts here, and you've got a mech army. That's kind of the primary way Swarm Hosts get used against, is the mech player. And the best answer for the mech player is to protect your units mostly with the siege tank, but you can't build too many siege tanks, or you run into problems. When you are using this, use your Hellbats in front to kind of soak up the damage, but the real answer here is the Raven. And when you have a Protoss player using Swarm Hosts, you can just cast a bunch of Seeker Missiles, and the Swarm Hosts can't escape. And you can wait for them. I mean, that wasn't the most efficient trade, but I only have 2 Ravens for 10 Swarm Hosts. I wouldn't. The turret was just kind of a trick. I wouldn't recommend doing that. But yeah, just use the Seeker Missiles. So let's try the same thing with one more Raven. You'll see how much more effective it can be. And you can constantly go in with Swarm Hosts or Ravens in this way, and you'll find that the Terran opponent is not going to, or the Zerg opponent is going to stop making Swarm Hosts. They're going to get sick of that very quickly. So, pretty effective counter there. Against Bio, you almost never see Swarm Hosts, just because all you'd have to do is get stimmed Marauders. Let's say they're going in. Normally you would use CompSat, but I'm going to have to add in a Raven just because there's no automatic detection on this test map. And all you do is scoop your units up and boost over. And these would be, you would wait for the Locusts to get over, and you could just stim your Marauders and just focus down the Swarm Hosts before they can do much about it. Okay, so that's an easy counter, Marauders and a Medivac. And obviously another good option is the Banshee. You can snipe out Swarm Hosts that are on the outskirts that aren't protected. Battle Cruisers work well, really. Sky Terran, there's no real counter for if you can actually get up to mass Battle Cruiser Viking Raven as Terran. I mean, that obviously takes a lot of resources, but basically air, if you're using Bio, use Marauders and drops to avoid Locusts, and if you're using mech, add on Ravens. Okay, so against other Zerg players, I'm going to add on a couple of upgrades that would be standard. So the only really attack move counter is going to be the Ultralisk. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Forgot to add an overseer on this particular map. So let's say you had one player had swarm hosts, this player had Ultralisks. Ultralisks can actually attack move against swarm hosts, meaning that they'll just tear through Locusts so quickly that, and they'll be fast enough to chase down the swarm host. Even if the swarm host did the unburrow trick where it ran away while the Locusts were there, this would be an easy win for the Ultralisks. But other ground units don't fare so well against the swarm host. One option is going to be the Zergling, and Zerglings themselves are pretty bad against swarm hosts. But what they are good at is avoiding Locusts. So they're so fast that you would not even try to fight the Locust, and instead go around, get what you could, run, and just kind of repeat the process. And if you get the Locust even further away, that'd be even better. And you can hit hold position when you're on top of the swarm hosts so they don't hit the Locusts. And the further you can get the Locusts away, obviously the more uptime you're going to have. Okay, so that's one option. Your other option is going to be in the air. If you have Mutalisks, obviously you can chase down swarm hosts. But if there's too much anti-air, not going to work. The only thing that really is going to attack a fortified position from the front, aside from the Ultralisk, is just going to be a Broodlord. And that's just because Broodlords are good at killing ground units. I mean, they make free units. They have a nice long range. So, pretty simple stuff right there. And that's about it for the swarm host. Hope this video guide was helpful for you. Just remember that air units can work, but when there's that big defense with the queens, the Protoss players will definitely need Colossi. That's really the only race that really struggles. And mech does too, but remember Ravens with Seeker missiles, your answer. Zerg, Ultralisks, air units, even well-microed Zerglings can all work. So, hope this video guide was helpful for you.